Welcome to Hiraeth, the home of modern Welsh politics. Carmen Smith, or rather Baroness Smith of Llanfaes, is now the youngest member of the House of Lords, and she joins us on the pod tonight to discuss her new role and the role of the Lords in democracy and in Wales. Hello, Carmen.
Hello, Matt. How are you doing?
Very well. Firstly, congratulations on the appointment. So the youngest member of the House of Lords and former Chief of Staff to the Plaid Cymru Senedd group is an impressive political resume, but what first motivated you to get involved in politics?
Right, I love this question actually, because there was one particular moment actually. So when I was, how old was I? I think 16, 17, and there was a local elections going on in Ynys Môn at the time, and that's where I was living, and so some Plaid activists knocked on my door, including Leanne, which was quite a surprise, really. I was just like, oh, my parents aren't in, sorry. And she was just like, well, I'm quite interested in talking to you. And I was like, I'm not interested in politics, sorry. Yeah, so just carried on with my day. And then the next day I saw her in the local village, and she was being followed by some TV cameras, and I was just like, oh, that was that woman I met yesterday. And I walked past her and then she remembered my name, and it sounds really small, but to be honest, it was quite a big deal just to kind of see, I suppose, a woman being taken quite seriously in that kind of sphere. And I think I just always presumed it was just for men and people from a certain background. So so I just basically started getting interested in politics from that moment, really. I suppose Leanne inspired me to join Plaid, and it just, I shared like similar values and stuff with the party, and that's kind of where it all started, really.
I think everybody who's been involved in sort of professional politics, Carmen, though, knows that there's quite a big jump, isn't there, between being interested and even being an activist and sort of getting involved in the front line. And obviously, you've done quite a lot in your short career. Obviously, without talking about being the Chief of Staff to Plaid Cymru, you've also worked in the European Parliament, been a candidate for the European parliamentary elections when we were still in the EU. What was the practical steps in getting involved at such a young age in professional politics?
I guess a couple of things, really. One, that was like kind of my route in terms of getting interested in like national politics. And then from that moment, I then had like some work experience with Ieuan Wyn-Jones at the time, who was the member of Senedd at the time for Ynys Môn. And that kind of, I don't know, just showed me what actually politicians do, to be honest, and in terms of like understanding what casework look like and kind of that aspect. But then in terms of just general like getting involved, I really wanted to do something about changing policy on carers. So I was a young carer, and I felt that there were a few things that happened growing up that was really frustrating, just getting passed through the houses in terms of trying to get financial support. And it just really, really just wasn't like efficient. And so that's why I got involved then at like college. So in Coleg Menai, just involved with the Students' Union. And that's literally why I got involved, was kind of, I want to do something about that specific issue. In terms of like that specific issue, some people might not see that as like being, I suppose, political, but it was just like I was kind of brought in on like an issues based. And then from that moment, I guess, being involved in NUS and then being more involved then in like the Plaid youth movement, just other things came up that I was just like, oh, I'm really interested in that and I want to help contribute, basically. I guess there's loads of little moments and it's not really one. But yeah, you just kind of, you're not involved at all and then suddenly you're just really involved.
So now you're a baroness. Does that title jar you at all? You're not a supporter of an unelected second chamber, but have you found it hard to reconcile that belief with your decision to take the seat?
I mean, honestly, if you told me a year ago, I wouldn't believe you for sure. And it's something that traditionally I haven't been interested in. And I don't really see it as, for the title, but I see it more of a trying to prove that it doesn't need to be a certain person from a certain background that goes into it, if you know what I mean. So hopefully by doing so, and if I, hopefully do a good job, we can get newer voices in who perhaps next time they're like, oh, they see something and they're like, oh, I'd love to do that, but I don't really think I know enough, or I don't have the confidence. Then maybe, I could kind of motivate them to perhaps consider it, So I don't really see it as the title. So and I think it's quite jarring, like you say. But I think it's just a great opportunity to potentially just bring new voices in, basically.
Is the process of becoming a member of the House of Lords quite as antiquated as we might expect? Is there anything that's strange that happened so far to you that you feel like you're obligated to report back on?
Yeah, so I mean, it's early days at the moment, so I'm sure when at some point when I speak to you again, I'll have plenty of stories to tell. But I mean, so far I've had a meeting with the title is the Garter King of Arms, so they're like the representative of the king, and basically that is how you then like get given a title, and that kind of whole meeting in itself was just really strange to me. But then there is the ceremony in a few weeks' time where you get introduced to Parliament, and there is a lot of traditions there that you kind of wonder, why they still exist as they do, just in terms of like wearing the gown and that kind of side of things. So yeah, it is all a bit. I think I'm just taking it day by day at the moment, and as things come. But yeah, it's quite strange.
So why did you pick Llanfaes rather than Ynys Môn? Choices like that, I've always fascinated me how people make those decisions about titles.
I just felt like I wanted, if I was going to have a title, and I had to because my surname is Smith, so it's as common as you get. So you actually have to then have a title because there's already Smiths in the Lords, basically. I just feel like choosing Llanfaes, for one, it's a Welsh name, so I think it's important to, platform the Welsh language more, especially in that space. But then also Llanfaes is that's where I grew up, and it's mainly a council estate. It's an underprivileged area. I don't think many people know about it, and it just kind of felt like something that I wanted to promote, if you know what I mean, rather than Ynys Môn in terms of its, I think quite a few people know about where Ynys Môn is, but Llanfaes is more unknown. But I think that was just kind of suited, really.
So in the media you've done to date, you've discussed how you think that Wales will be independent in your lifetime, but how would you describe the sort of health of that campaign currently?
It's a journey. We're not going to get independence tomorrow. However, I think it's a journey where every conversation matters. Every conversation is another step in that direction. And ultimately, I think we all, Westminster isn't working for Wales. And there's no sign that it's going to change in that way, in terms of how budgets are decided, and Wales has only really been given enough money to be able to survive and not thrive. And I just I'm really like bought into that kind of future for Wales, as in Wales having its own, being able to make its own decisions and have the opportunity to bring in investment and grow. Independence isn't going to happen tomorrow, but I do believe it will happen in my lifetime, because a lot of people my age and in my generation are a lot more like curious about it, I guess. And I think that kind of conversation and those opinions are just going to get stronger.
You've also stated, of course, that you're not a favour of Wales, if it became independent, ever having an unelected second chamber. But could you see the appeal of a space for a revising chamber, or even a constitutionally mandated space for experts within the Welsh democratic system?
I quite like the idea of citizens' assemblies, and just kind of rethinking how a modern democracy looks like. And I think that's what's quite exciting, is in in an independent Wales, we can kind of decide what that democracy looks like in a more like, fair way, and how it actually could represent society. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what it would look like, but I'm very much open to being part of that kind of discussion. But certainly it shouldn't be unelected, and it shouldn't just represent one part of society.
You've set yourself up to be quite a disruptor, I think, of the sort of established order of the House of Lords. What do you think are the practical steps you'd take in order to do this? Do you think it is more just informing the public about what's actually going on in the Lords, or do you think there is a sort of practical step you'll be able to take as a politician to influence the way they operate?
I think ultimately, I have to be realistic. I am just one voice in that chamber, but I think, what I hope to bring to the role is to be able to communicate to different audiences about what happens there and get their kind of perspective, kind of being a legislator that can understand ordinary people more. And I think that's kind of where I can add more to that chamber. But in terms of looking into the future, in terms of being a disruptor, well, it just needs shaking up, and ultimately I hope that other people could join me there to do that too.
In terms of policy areas, I think you've mentioned a couple so far, sort of the pursuit of Welsh independence, the Welsh language, obviously issues relating to carer support. But what are the kind of key policy areas that are really in your heart and you want to take forward within the second chamber?
So I think there's 4 kind of main areas that I'd like to focus on. So one would be a spotlight on Welsh communities and Welsh issues, and an example of that would be in terms of coal tip safety, and kind of exploring how we can support communities in Wales in terms of Westminster isn't paying for that coal tip safety. However, those communities contributed to the whole of the UK in the past. So that just in terms of the fact that that's not equitable. So like an example of like a Welsh current affairs issues that probably aren't being raised in that space. So just first of all, just being a voice that stands up for the people of Wales and Welsh specific issues that just aren't being voiced, and just using that platform to kind of share that message. And then a second area that I'd like to focus on is, and I've touched on this, is in terms of just championing underheard voices as well. So, in terms of people from a working class background, young women, people of colour, asylum seekers, like trying to create platforms for those that often just aren't heard in those spaces, and kind of supporting them to have that platform basically, and be able to voice their opinions. And then a third area, this is more, I suppose, time sensitive, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next general election. But in terms of, while David Cameron sits in the Lords as Foreign Secretary, MPs can't ask him questions formally, and it's only those in the Lords that can. So, I see a bit of a role there in terms of scrutinising his work in that kind of space. And then I think just the last one would just be why I'm in that role is the day-to-day stuff in terms of legislation. At the moment, they're discussing, the Rwanda bill. Plaid have been very strong on, in terms of the grounds of it being immoral. So like continuing that work and just be, using that chamber as well to platform our messaging in another forum, basically.
I mean, a lot has been made about your age during this whole process, and to us, we think it's an incredible achievement. But do you feel that some people have been ever so slightly patronising, perhaps, in the way it's been covered, or how do you feel the media attention on you has been during this period?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has been quite personal, but I think and along with other people, we were expecting that, unfortunately. And at first, I think it did kind of hurt. But then when I remembered why I'm doing it, I've changed how I feel about it, just in terms of, if I can do it and do a good job, then hopefully the next young woman that kind of puts themselves out there into such a position won't have as much kind of targeted hate about their age or being a young woman, you know, just kind of breaking that kind of stereotype, I guess. But yeah, I mean, but also I accept criticism, and I get that. But then also I do think that the House of Lords, the average age is 71, and that isn't representative of our society. And so most people there there isn't even many people there that represent people under 50. So, you know, so at 27, it's, you know, I think it's a good thing to have, you know, just to give a different perspective, basically. So, yeah, fair, you know, if people think that, that's fair, but I just want to be able to bring in new voices, hopefully, and prove them wrong.
No, I think that's completely fair enough, Carmen. I'm just intrigued to see to what extent you think it's an age thing, to what extent you think it's a gender thing. Do you think you have received more criticism because of your age, because you're a woman, than necessarily you think a 27-year-old bloke would do?
I think it's a bit of both. So I think it's mainly age, but then at the same time, I'm sure some of your listeners will remember when Charlotte Owen was appointed into the Lord. She was also appointed at the same time as a man of a similar age, but the media hasn't really discussed him, is what I mean. So just in terms of not about them as individuals, but just how that's quite interesting that they were the similar ages, but you know, mainly the media kind of went after her appointment in like more of a negative way, and that just kind of perhaps shows, you know, perhaps an example of where gender kind of does come into it too. But you know, you can't ever really be sure.
Do you feel as though you've received enough support from Plaid Cymru, both in sort of this change to your life, but also in a professional basis of how you're going to be able to operate in the Lords?
Ultimately, when I put my name forward, I only did so because of people internally within the party were encouraging me to do so. Mainly women, to be fair, which was great. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without support from both friends and people within the party to do it, really. So I think that people around me have been really, really supportive, and I'm really grateful for that.
So the process that saw you elected feels weird to say, obviously, to an appointed chamber, but obviously determined that you would be Plaid Cymru's nominee for the next position in the House of Lords they would receive. Obviously, ensure that a woman would come top of that list. But Plaid have been somewhat reticent in the past to sort of use all women shortlists in Senedd selections, and with the fact that the gender quotas bill seems to have gone away or is very unlikely to make progress, do you think you'd be in favour of Plaid Cymru using this sort of process in the future to ensure that women are selected top of these new seat lists we're going to have in the next Senedd election?
Yeah, well, I think these types of procedures are needed until you kind of change that balance. I think it's the best way to make that change is, you know, and as a pie of equality to push through and make that change is to have, you know, that like we've had similar elections like you've just listed there. So in 99, 2003, 2007, with the first person elected in each of the regional lists had to be a woman. And we've had some brilliant women come into politics through those channels, basically. And yeah, no, I'm a supporter of those types of procedures.
It's a difficult one, though, isn't it? Because I think, obviously, speaking from a Labour Party perspective, who've been using all-women shortlists for years and years and years now, you do notice that often when they're no longer there, the party seemingly defaults back to selecting men, unfortunately. But I suppose this is a procedural issue to deal with a sort of wider systemic issue in our society and in our politics, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and you kind of have to change that tide, and it doesn't just happen in one election. It takes you know several elections to be able to change that. The way that the society reacts, basically.
So speaking of future elections, whilst you can't be an MS and a member of the House of Lords at the same time, that would not stop you from being a candidate for any future Senedd elections. Do you think you'd have ambitions one day to stand in the Senedd?
I'm just taking it day by day at the moment.
Fantastic politician's answer. No, but it must have crossed your mind, obviously, having stood for the European Parliament before. I mean, not to hold you in on any answer, but it must, for a point, cross your mind if, in case you ever decided no longer to wish. No, if you got your dream and the House of Lords was abolished, you'd never know.
Was that my dream, though? Well, no. What I would say is, I just always want to do something that I feel like I'm contributing in a positive way. So whatever that might look like, I can't. I don't know what the future holds really. But yeah, I'm just committed to taking on this new role, and we'll see what happens. But I think it's all about bringing people with you as well, and hopefully, and I'd love to encourage young women to stand, across Wales for different roles.
Well, whilst we've still got you, I think we should talk a little bit about Plaid Cymru and the future of Plaid Cymru. Obviously, a lot of good policies have been won through the cooperation agreement, and as we head into the next Senedd election, it looks very likely that we'll need some form of coalition in order to govern in the next Senedd. What do you think are the sort of benefits of this sort of partnership working that Plaid Cymru have embarked upon, and do you see space for that in the future? And not only in the Senedd, but as you progress, obviously working in the Lords.
I think it's healthy politics. And what I mean by that is actually seeing politicians from different parties and those that aren't in government being able to deliver policies that matter to people's day-to-day lives. And I think a prime example of that is free school meals. In terms of, I don't know what the figure is now, but it's something like 2 million free school meals have now been delivered as part of the cooperation agreement. That is helping people now, and I think that's what happens when you have cooperative politics, and when people come around a table together, and make some compromises, but actually deliver now, and not just kind of argue and just be like, well, no, actually, I 100% can't support on this, but actually come meet in the middle. And then when you meet in the middle, you can actually make positive changes to people's lives, I think. So I think it sets a good precedent for the future, especially with Senedd reform, having a bigger Senedd and what that could look like. But to be an effective Welsh government, I think you do need to open up to other parties, and just to make the best policies, really.
So obviously, before we get to the Senedd election, we've got the rather tricky bit of the general election before us, probably hopefully at some point this year. How do you see this year going politically? Do you see a strong result for Plaid in the future? And obviously, I think we're all thinking that it's very likely to be a Labour government. But with everything that's going on in Welsh politics at the minute, can you see the wheels ever falling off the big Labour machine as we head towards the general election?
It's a tough question. It also depends when the election lands, I guess. But I don't think that the Conservatives are, going to do well in the current scenario. But hopefully, while I'm working with the Westminster group, I'm hoping that we'll have a few new Plaid Cymru MPs to join in Llynos in Ynys Môn and Catrin as well, which would be brilliant to have other women voices as well in Westminster. So yeah, I guess we'll see. But I really hope that, and I'm quite excited for them to join, really.
Carmen, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Diolch.
Thank you for listening to Hiraeth. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.